My father raised his glass and looked straight past me. "To Brett," he said, voice carrying the full length of the private dining room. "The real pride of this family." 20 relatives lifted their glasses. My mother smiled the way she always did, carefully, aiming it at the table. "I am Marcus. I am 38. I drive a 2013 Honda Civic with a dent above the rear wheel. Well, I do freelance graphic design. Mostly small clients, local stuff at least. That is what my family thinks I do." And that night, my mother's birthday dinner, a Tuesday in October, a restaurant on the north side of Indianapolis, was the night they found out what I actually do. Pull up a chair. This one takes a minute. The reservation was for 8 o'clock. We arrived at 7:55. The private room was already half full. White tablecloths, low lighting, a centerpiece that probably cost more than my first freelance invoice. My cousin Greg was on his phone near the window. Aunt Patricia was explaining something to the waiter, with the authority of someone who eats here often. And at the head of the long table, arranging place cards with the efficiency of a man who controls most rooms he walks into, was my father, Richard Webb, 64, founder of Greystone Mercer, built from a two-person operation over 30 years. He mentions it often. He saw us come in. He gave Diana a nod that was almost warm. He gave me the other kind. "Marcus." That was all. Then back to the place cards. My mother found us near the door. Carol Webb, 61, still genuinely beautiful in the way that makes you understand certain choices. She hugged Diana first, then me, and held on a half-second longer than usual. "I am glad you came," she said quietly. "Happy birthday, Mom." She touched my face once, quick. Then my father called her name from across the room, and she went. We found our seats. Diana's hand found my knee under the table before I even reached for hers. Dinner started the way these things always do. Safe conversations, careful laughter, the practiced warmth of people who see each other 4 times a year. I answered questions about work the same way I always do. "Still freelancing?" Something like that. It satisfies people just enough to move on. Brett arrived 20 minutes late. That is also the kind of person he is. My brother is 42, broad-shouldered, walks into rooms like he was told they were built for him. VP at Greystone Mercer for 6 years. My father's right hand. Everyone knew the succession plan. Nobody said it out loud, until tonight. Brett clapped a hand on my shoulder as he passed. "Little brother still driving that Honda." "It runs great," I said. He laughed. Not meanly, exactly. Just the way you laugh at something that doesn't require cruelty because the gap speaks for itself. Then he took his seat and the dynamic shifted the way it always does when Brett arrives. My father waited until the main course arrived. He stood, and the room gave him its attention without being asked. That is a skill. I've always recognized it. "I want to say something before dessert." He picked up his wine glass. "Carol, you know I am not a sentimental man." Quiet laughter around the table. "But tonight I want to acknowledge what this family is built on. Hard work. The right kind of ambition." He turned toward Brett, and the turn was deliberate. "Brett has spent 6 years proving this company is in good hands. The board agreed last month. Effective January, he becomes CEO of Greystone and Mercer." Applause. Genuine. Warm, the kind that fills a room. My mother looked at her plate. Brett accepted it with a practiced modesty that had probably been practiced. He thanked the family. Said something about legacy, mentioned my father 4 times in 90 seconds. Then my father sat down, and in the particular silence that followed, he looked at me. "You are quiet," he said. "Just listening." Listening. He said it back to me the way you repeat a word when you are deciding whether it is an insult. "Your brother's about to run $100 million company, and you are listening." "Dad," Brett said, half laughing. "I am serious. I love both my sons, but there is a difference between a man who builds something and a man who," he paused, choosing, "does design work, freelance design work." I didn't look away. I know the difference. "Do you?" He picked up his glass again. "Because from where I am sitting, it looks like you married a good woman, got comfortable, and stopped trying." Deanna's fingers pressed into my knee. Not a warning, more like an anchor. I heard Brett say somewhere to my left, "Dad, come on." But my father was still watching me, waiting for the flinch. He has been waiting since I was 22 and told him I didn't want to join the company. He didn't get it. I picked up my water glass. "Congratulations, Brett. Genuinely, you've worked hard for this." Brett blinked. He wasn't sure what to do with that. "Tell them tonight. They deserve to know. I turned to look at her. She meant it. Her eyes said, "We've waited long enough." I thought about it. I thought about saying it right here, over the birthday cake, in front of Aunt Patricia and Cousin Greg and the waiter pretending not to listen. I shook my head, just slightly. I stood, and I lifted my glass toward my mother. "Happy birthday, Mom. We're going to head out early morning tomorrow. But I love you." I set the glass down, buttoned my jacket, and looked at my father one last time. "Thanks for dinner." He thought he'd won. I could see it in the ease in his shoulders as he reached for his wine. I let him have it. The valet brought the Civic around. Diana didn't say anything until we were out of the parking lot and onto Meridian Street. "Tomorrow then," she said. "Tomorrow." She looked out at the road. "They're not going to see it coming," she said. "No," I said. "They're not." We got home a little past 10. I poured a glass of water, sat down at the kitchen table, and called our attorney. Not because I was angry, because it was time. "Send the ownership transfer notice to the full board tonight," I said. "Standard format. Copy Richard Webb's personal email. I want it in his inbox before he goes to sleep." A pause on the other end. "You sure about the timing?" "I am sure. Done by midnight." "Thank you." I hung up. Deanna was leaning against the counter, watching. She didn't say anything. She knows when a moment doesn't need commentary. I went to bed. I slept fine. By 7 the next morning, my phone had 11 missed calls from my father. 6 voice messages from Brett. The last one was 23 seconds long and contained exactly 2 words before he hung up. Diana read the screen over my coffee mug and raised an eyebrow. 11. I counted. She set a plate of toast in front of me. "Eat first." I ate first. At 8:45, the gate camera chimed. My father's SUV turned up the driveway, Brett's Audi right behind it. Diana glanced at the monitor. "Right on time," she said. I buttoned my shirt, picked up my coffee, and went to open the door. My father looked like a man who hadn't slept. He was holding a folder of printed documents the way people hold things when they want to look prepared, but are running on panic. Brett stood a half step behind him. Brett doesn't usually stand behind anyone. "Come in," I said. I made coffee. My father walked past me without answering. Brett followed. They stopped in the living room. I watched my father's eyes move across the space and land nowhere comfortable. "You want to explain what this is?" He dropped the folder on the coffee table. Papers slid out. The transfer notice was on top, still crisp from the printer. "It is what it looks like," I said. "Don't do that." His voice had the low, controlled fury of a man who has spent 60 years being obeyed. "You sat there all night and said nothing. And then you sent that email. And now you are telling me you bought my company." "I didn't buy it last night." I sat down, which seemed to frustrate him more than anything else I could have done. "We've been acquiring shares for 14 months. The final transfer cleared 3 days ago." Brett picked up the top page. His face did something I hadn't seen before. The slow rearrangement of a person whose model of the world just stopped working. He checked his phone. Then checked it again. "There is an email," he said. Quiet, almost to himself. "From the board's legal counsel," Diana said from the doorway. She walked in and set a second folder on the table. "Share registry, transfer certificates, the chairman's signed exit agreement. It is all there." Brett sat down on the arm of the couch. Just sat down, like his legs made the decision without him. My father turned to me. "You planned this behind my back. You told me I'd never understand business," I said. "At my wedding, loud enough for Diana to hear. I let that sit. So I learned, quietly. I am not saying it to be cruel. I am saying it because you asked why. This isn't learning." He stepped closer. "This is revenge." I kept my voice even. "Revenge would have been last night, in front of everyone." "I didn't do that." I looked at him. "I thought you deserved better than that." He stared at me, cycling through responses: anger, authority, guilt, and finding none of them. Brett looked up from the papers. "So what now?" It was the first reasonable question either of them had asked. "Now we go to the board meeting tomorrow," I said, "and we do this properly." My father picked up his folder. For the first time in my life, he looked like a man who didn't know what room he was in. He left without another word. Brett paused at the door, started to say something, stopped, and walked out. The door closed behind them, not a slam, just a click. Diana came and stood beside me. Outside, the SUV reversed down the driveway. The Audi followed. "You okay?" she asked. I picked up my coffee. It had gone cold. "Yeah. Tomorrow's the real one." She nodded, took the mug from my hands and went to reheat it without being asked. I stood at the window. A neighbor walked a dog. A kid went by on a bike. The same Tuesday it had been an hour ago. The Civic sat in the driveway, dented and unhurried, exactly where I'd left it. The Greystone Mercer building was a 12-story glass tower downtown. I'd driven past it 100 times, watched it from the outside for longer than that. Deanna and I arrived at 9 sharp. I was wearing the same jacket I'd had on the night before, not by accident. The lobby receptionist gave us the look. Deanna gave her our names. The receptionist's expression shifted. She made a call, and 2 minutes later someone from legal came down to take us up. The boardroom was on the 11th floor. Glass walls, city view. A long mahogany table with 12 chairs. The Greystone Mercer logo on the far wall caught the morning light. 8 board members were already seated. They turned when we walked in. The careful neutrality of people who'd received a very surprising email and were still deciding what it meant. My father sat at the far end of the table. Brett sat beside him. Neither of them looked at us. That told me everything about how much energy they'd already spent. Diana and I took seats near the center, not at the head. Brett broke first. He addressed the room before anyone else could. "I want to go on record that the legality of this acquisition is in question. The board should hear from counsel before." "They already have," said the CFO. A measured woman named Patricia Oakes, who had been with the company 11 years. She set down her pen. "I spoke with outside counsel this morning. The transfer is clean." Brett looked at her. She looked back. My father said nothing. I let the room settle. Then I leaned forward slightly, hands on the table. "I don't want to make this complicated," I said, "so I'll keep it simple. Diana and I have held a growing stake in this company for 14 months. 3 days ago, we became majority shareholders. That is not a threat. It is just the situation. And the situation means we have some decisions to make together." One of the older board members cleared his throat. "What kind of decisions?" "The kind you've been avoiding," I said. 3 consecutive quarters of declining profit. A compensation structure that doesn't reflect performance. An HR backlog flagged 18 months ago that nobody touched. I paused. You see things more clearly from the outside, especially when you are watching as an investor. The room was quiet. A few members exchanged glances. My father's voice came from the end of the table, low and controlled. "You think you can walk in here and run a company? You've never worked a day inside." "I am not here to run it alone," I said. "That is why there is a board." "Don't be clever." "I am not." I looked at him. "You built something real. 30 years is 30 years. But somewhere along the way the company stopped being the point. You promoted loyalty over performance. You underpaid the people doing the actual work." I let that land. "I've watched you do the same thing in this family my whole life." The silence had a different quality now. Not hostile. More like held breath. Brett said sharply, "This is a board meeting, not a therapy session." "You are right." I turned to the room. "New compensation review, starting next month. HR backlog cleared by end of quarter. Richard and Brett stay on as paid consultants for 6 months." I looked at my father. "I am not here to erase what you built. I am here to stop it collapsing under its own weight." My father had gone very still. Brett started to speak. Stopped. Patricia Oakes said quietly, "I think I can speak for several of us when I say this is overdue." Someone near the window said agreed without looking up. Then another. Then a third. My father pushed back slowly and stood. He was looking at me. Not with rage now. Something quieter. Something that might, eventually, become something else. He walked out. Brett sat for another moment. The rest of the meeting took 40 minutes. Items discussed. Decisions recorded. Diana took notes. I asked more questions than I made statements. When it ended, people filed out with the efficiency of a group already adapting. Patricia Oakes stopped beside me on her way to the door. "For what it is worth," she said quietly, "a lot of us have been waiting for someone to say those things out loud." I nodded. "I hope we earn it," she smiled. Brief, real, and left. Diana and I took the elevator down alone. In the lobby, I stopped at the front desk and thanked the receptionist. She looked mildly startled. Then she smiled. Outside, the air was cool and sharp. We walked to the parking garage. The Civic was on level 2, exactly where I'd left it. Same dent, same cracked mirror. I unlocked it and got in. Diana buckled her seatbelt. "You okay?" "Yay," I said. I sat there a moment, hands on the wheel looking at the concrete wall in front of us. Then I started the car, and we drove out into the light. The headlines came faster than I expected. New ownership at Greystone Mercer. New leadership promises reform. Employees respond with cautious optimism. One quote from accounting. Anonymous. "It feels like someone finally opened a window." We moved into temporary office space on the 8th floor. I spent the first week in meetings with department heads, mostly listening, asking the same question different ways. What has been broken the longest? The answers were consistent. People had been waiting years to be asked. Things were moving. And then 5 days in, my assistant appeared in the doorway with a look I recognized. "You need to see something," she said. She handed me a tablet, a news clip, buffering on the screen. The headline read, "Greystone Mercer acquisition under scrutiny. Sources allege financial irregularities." It was everywhere by noon. Brett had media contacts from his VP days. He'd used them carefully. No name attached, just enough signal to get the story running. Out of context figures, an implication without a direct claim, enough to create noise. Diana walked in behind my assistant. "I already called legal." "Good," I said. "Get a conference room ready and call a press contact." The conference was at 2 o'clock. I walked in without notes. False narratives move fast when truth threatens something fragile. I laid out every document in front of the cameras. Share registry, transfer certificates, the former chairman's written statement. His own words, the right decision, handled with integrity. Exactly as agreed. The room watched in silence. Afterward, I said one more thing. The people who work at this company showed up every day for years under conditions that didn't always respect them. That is what this transition is about. Not the people in the headlines, the ones who weren't. I stepped back from the podium. In the back of the room, behind a pair of sunglasses, Brett stood very still. When I finished, he turned and walked out before the cameras caught his face. I didn't watch him go. 3 weeks later, a letter arrived at our home. My mother's handwriting on the envelope. Carol Webb, who still addressed things by hand because she said it was the only way to mean them. I sat with it for a minute before I opened it. A page and a half, careful cursive. She said she'd been watching. She said she was proud. Not the way my father used that word. As a reward, more like a door opening. She'd made a decision she should have made a long time ago. Staying with her sister in Bloomington for now. She'd call when she was ready. The last line said, "I should have stood up sooner. That one's on me." I read it twice. Then I folded it and set it on the table. Diana found me there a few minutes later. She didn't ask what the letter said. She sat down across from me and poured us both coffee. "She okay?" she asked. "She will be," I said. That evening, Diana handed me a key. The old-fashioned kind, for a door you actually have to unlock. "New building," she said. "For your design firm. Your name on the lease, not Greystone, yours." I held it for a moment. Turned it over. "What about Greystone?" I asked. "It is stable," she said. "The board knows what they're doing. Let it stand on its own. You don't need to live inside your father's company to fix it." She was right. She usually is. I put on my jacket and went downstairs. The Civic was at the curb. I drove for a while. No destination. Just Indianapolis at night. Block by block. I thought about the first time I told my father I wanted to start my own design studio. I was 22. He laughed, not unkindly, and told me dreams don't pay bills. He wasn't wrong. Dreams alone don't. But I'd figured out the rest myself. My father retired to his lake house 6 weeks later. Brett took a position at a smaller firm in Cincinnati, humbled, by all accounts, but adapting. My mother called in November. We talked for an hour. She laughed at one point, genuinely, and I realized I hadn't heard that in a long time. Some things take a long time to repair. Others were just waiting for someone to start. I still drive the Civic. People ask me sometimes why I don't get something newer, better, more appropriate for where I am now. I tell them it runs fine. They usually laugh. And I let them. That is the end of today's story. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. A new story drops every week, right here on Blood Never Lies. See you in the next one.